Pioneer parenting in the digital age.
I decided I needed to get to the bottom of understanding how technology and my kids were interacting.
Kirk Cameron sets out to assess the damage.
Unfortunately, a lot of parents are saying just do whatever you want.
Find out what you can do to better connect. Plus, Ann Jimenez joins us to discuss how choices shape our lives for better or worse. All on today's 700 Club Interactive. Well, welcome to the show. Billy Graham was best known for his gospel crusades where millions of people put their faith in Christ. But no remembrance of Billy Graham would be complete without telling the story of the little-known but crucial role he played in America's civil rights movement. Charlene Aaron has the story.
The year was 1953. America's borders were filled with racial tension and uncertainty. The Reverend Billy Graham was sailing uncharted territory when he did the unthinkable. He held a crusade in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where thousands of men, women, and children of all races sat together and worshiped the Lord.
But when God looks at you, he doesn't look on the outward appearance. The Bible says he looks upon the heart.
He took his fight to end segregation to the streets.
Graham had been preaching here at Madison Square Garden to thousands nightly, but very few blacks came. So at the suggestion of a colleague, he asked Reverend Howard Jones for help. Jones recommended that Graham take his message to the streets of New York, and that's exactly what he did.
He said, I decided I was never going to speak to any more segregated audiences. And he said, I want it to be that way. He said, what would you suggest that we do? I said, if blacks aren't coming, go where they are. He said, what do you mean? I said, go to Harlem.
Graham preached at Salem Methodist Church to thousands. The next week, he went to Brooklyn. And slowly but surely, the Crusades in New York became increasingly integrated. Prominent singer Ethel Waters attended the event and rededicated her life to Christ. Graham even invited his good friend, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to attend one of the events.
We thank thee this evening for the marvelous things which have been done in this city through the dynamic preaching of this great evangelist. We ask thee, O God, to continue blessing him, give him continued power and authority. And as we listen to him tonight, grant that our hearts and spirits will be open to the divine inflow.
Graham faced a flurry of criticism from both blacks and whites, but that did not deter him.
Some whites wanted to know why you would fool around with these people, you know. And some said, if you're going to integrate your team, we will not support you, we will not give you money. So they used all kind of pressures on him. But he said, I don't care. I'm going to stick by my guns.
Some of the criticisms were that Mr. Graham was not concerned about the black community and that he didn't speak enough about civil rights.
Graham went to Dr. King for advice.
Martin Luther King suggested to me that I stay in the stadiums in the South and hold integrated meetings because he was probably going to take to the streets. He said, I'll probably stay in the streets and I might get killed in the streets. But he said, I don't think you ought to, because he said, you will be able to do things I can't do and I can do some things you can't do, but we're after the same objective.
And so he did, holding crusades from Arkansas to Alabama.
So here we were, with neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood in my state on the verge of violence, and yet tens of thousands of black and white Christians there together in a football stadium. And when he issued the call at the end of the message, thousands came down, holding hands, arm in arm, crying. It was the beginning of the end of the Old South in my home state. I will never forget it.
He even went to South Africa, preaching before an integrated audience in 1973.
Man has a will of his own. God gave it to you.
Graham also worked closely with Presidents Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon, urging them to ensure equality for all.
Then there's the race problem. And this problem, it seems to me, should be put in its proper perspective. It is a world problem. Greater improvement is being made today in America than perhaps any great nation in the history of the world, because we at least are attempting to solve the problem through understanding, through dialogue, through legislation.
In the end, Graham's legacy is one that is filled with a message of love, togetherness, and unity.
But I think Billy has proven the fact that in Christ, there's no east or west or north or south. We're just loving.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
What an incredible legacy, what an incredible man, probably the greatest preacher that America has ever produced, and he will be sorely missed. Well, up next, he's an actor, producer, activist, and evangelist. Kirk Cameron is here to talk about his most important role as a father. Find out how he plans to connect with his children and help you do the same. Well, he became a star in the 1980s as the lovable Mike Seaver. Well, today, Kirk Cameron is a husband, a father of 6, and he's helping his children avoid some of the unnecessary growing pains of their own.
We have an interesting tradition at our house. On Mother's Day, she goes out and she buys gifts for the kids. Well, one Mother's Day, Chelsea says to me, I want to get the kids smartphones, all of them. I said, okay, let's do it. Let's get the kids smartphones. I mean, what could be simpler? And what could possibly go wrong? And then I saw a story on the news of what happened to a man named Tim Woda and his son.
There was this grown man who was soliciting my child. And I said, where'd you meet this person? He said, I met this person on Facebook. I said, well, that's not possible because you don't have a Facebook account. He had this whole digital life that I'd had no idea even existed.
I decided I needed to get to the bottom of understanding how technology and my kids were interacting.
Unfortunately, a lot of parents are saying just do whatever you want.
50% of kids feel they're addicted to their social media.
Yeah, if you're a kid with a smartphone, you could look up anything you want.
It's a free-for-all. You can look at pornography. There's constant reinforcement, pings, tings, new friends.
I got to create my life the way I want it to be seen. It wasn't my true reality.
My daughter has tons of Instagram friends, but she has no friends.
They're more like strangers that have been identified.
They call it like fatty. You're just so dumb. The words they start giving you is the words you believe.
That becomes their life, their social media world. But that world can be quickly upended.
I had a gun at my head.
If we don't help our kids by preparing them for this world, then who will?
The Lord Jesus on the door. Nobody gets to the sheep except through me.
It's never too late. There's never been a generation like it. We're blazing a new trail. We are the pioneer parents. If the devil wants to come knocking on my door, looking for my children, he's gonna find out real quick he came to the wrong house. Okay, maybe that was a little over the top.
Well, Kirk joins us, and it's good to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. Great
Welcome.
to be here.
That's a very unusual Mother's Day custom, tradition, where instead of it being about mom says, I'm going to give to you. How did that start?
My wife has always wanted to get gifts for the kids on Mother's Day because she says they're responsible for making me a mom, and it's one of the best things in my life. So she does this, and that's really how we got started on this whole social media journey with making the movie. Was she got smartphones for the kids. And that's when the trouble started. That's when I started hearing stories and reading articles and getting educated about the fact that I may have just given them a portal to things really dangerous.
Well, it sounds like a great idea. I remember my daughter when she was 12, it became sort of a constant thing. Daddy, when am I going to get a smartphone? And then she got really smart about it to say, well, if I am stranded somewhere, I would really be nice to have a smartphone so I could call you and you could come get me.
She's playing the guilt card right there.
She just played it, and it worked. But what have you found was the negative side to these devices?
Well, at our family, we are pro-technology, as I'm sure we are all right here. We love the ability to get good messages out and to be able to talk to people on the other sides of the world and affect good. But there's the obvious dangers of kids being addicted to technology. Now, 9 to 10 hours a day is common for kids on a device. There's also the kind of explicit content that we don't want our kids to see, and so we try to shut that down as best we can, but there's always a way, it seems, to get around it.
Right.
And then there's predators. There's actually the way it rewires our children's brains with some of the chemical and the social feedback loops that occur when kids get likes on an Instagram post. So that, combined with the way people are now interacting with one another within their families, within their friend and peer groups, and we didn't want to be damage control defensive parents. We wanted to get on the offense, put our arms around it, and say, how can we help our kids to embrace technology and be trailblazers in this wild new frontier of social media and technology with our kids? That's why we made Connect.
Okay. What would you say to parents? What's the number one thing they need to be looking out for?
There's always going to be a new piece of technology that is going to be the silver bullet that's going to protect your kids. Not true. Good technology is helpful, and we talk about a few in Connect. But at the end of the day, the most important thing all the experts are telling us, stay connected with your kids, because they will make mistakes. If you're in relationship with them, if you have that kind of fully engaged presence in your child's life, you can talk about those things. You can work through the mistakes, and you can make better choices in the future. Stay connected.
How do you talk to them about, do you understand this device is rewiring your brain? That was always a tough one for me, because I was running into they were developing the attachment where they literally couldn't be without the phone. And if you separated them from the phone, there was all this anxiety.
Like go ballistic.
Yeah, and I was saying, do you not understand what this is doing to you?
And I think that there's no real way for them to understand, because they love it. It's their world. And they've become so attached to this world of friends and followers that if you take that away from them, or if it gets turned on its head in some way, it disrupts their whole world. So I think a great way is to let them hear from experts. That's why I interviewed a neurosurgeon who can talk about what is physically happening inside of a brain. And he says a teenage mind is something we cannot afford to waste, because it's more pliable, it's more elastic, it's growing faster, and it's our teenagers who have the ability to think outside the box and invent cures to diseases, new technology. But the brain also works in such ways that if you focus too much of your time and attention on a phone, it actually causes you to become really good at one thing and begins to prune away all of your other abilities neurologically through those pathways that are not being used anymore. Like when you go throw a ball with your kids, or you go catch a fish in the stream, or you just look face to face with someone and you learn how to have real relationships.
Right. My kids got very proud of, they would say, they're phone ninjas.
Yeah,
they're able to
they're
get
good at it.
Yeah, they're really good at it. But then, okay, what about other aspects of life? And just trying to gently get them to that.
And I think that's why it is so important as parents that we reclaim our role as parents and understand that our kids need more than just information. Siri is not a good replacement for mom or dad, but kids need to be taught that as we lead the way. And we can't do that if we're not engaged and connected with them in a real rich relationship.
Let's talk about what I consider the darkest side of this technology, and that is it becomes a hunting ground for predators. Your film goes into that, and one of the amazing things is you had a dad who wasn't even aware that his son, was on Facebook. Why is that? How do you become aware of the interactions your child is having online?
What I've found researching this is that often parents will fall into the trap of believing that somehow their children need some level of privacy and autonomy separate from their parents, even though they're only 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old. And that's really where the problems start, when there's a secret world, when there is a hidden underworld activity that parents are not aware of. That's where the problems start. So I would begin by saying there's no passcodes, there's nothing like that on your phone that mom and dad don't have access to, because we love you, we want to protect you, and you need our help with this. Again, those are tough conversations to have with a 14-year-old who's used to privacy and autonomy. And the only way we're going to have them effectively is if we have a relationship with them where they know that we have their best interest in mind, that we love them and we want to help them to succeed and stay connected in a good way.
There's another dark place on these devices, and that is pornography. And I read an article in the New York Times just last week talking about how sexual education is happening on smartphones. And even if you have the filters, even if you have all of that, in a school environment, your child is going to be exposed to someone else's phone.
That's
and
right.
They're going to say, take a look at this. How soon should we get into that dialogue with our children that this isn't the proper way to look at sex?
All the experts are saying have those conversations earlier rather than later. You don't want to be doing damage control. Beat their friends to the punch and begin to have healthy conversations with your kids about adolescence, about dating, about sexuality, about marriage, and the context for things like sex. At the end of the day, we can find technology that will assist us as parents from them seeing things too heavy for them to be able to bear. But we have to ultimately help our kids to develop the kind of filter that you and I need to have. And that is the character filter that is built into my heart because I love God more than the pleasures of immorality or greed or sex outside of marriage or anything like that. At the end of the day, I can get around anything that my heart desires to get around if I find the right connections, and so can our kids. And what keeps me on the right track with my wife and my kids and my life is that I love God most, and I want to honor Him with my life. And as a parent, it's my job to impress that upon my kids.
All right, good word. Well, Connect, it's an appropriate titled movie. Connect hits theaters for just 2 nights only, February 27th and March 1st. And you can check out Fathom Events for tickets, times, and theaters near you. And Kirk, thank you for the message.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Great to talk with you.
Well, coming up, life is full of choices, and Jimenez will tell us what we should do when we don't know what to do. Well, that's next. Don't go away. In the 1960s, a New Yorker named John Jimenez chose to give up drugs and live for Christ. Well, 2 decades later, he helped launch a rally on our nation's capital and changed the political landscape of our country. Well, John has since passed away, but his wife Ann is carrying on his legacy, and she's reminding people of the power of a simple choice.
Daily, we are forced to make choices, some insignificant, some life-altering, and those choices have the power to change our lives. Ann Jimenez, pastor, author, and international speaker, believes she has uncovered the source of making right choices.
I believe I have found out one of the keys to the kingdom, folks. This opens up the Bible to me.
In her new book, Pro-Choices, Ann Jimenez shares practical truths from God's Word that will equip you to choose your way into the happy, fulfilling, and successful life God has for you.
Anna's with us, and it's always a pleasure to have you. Anna and I go back to the 1960s.
A long way.
She's family now, and it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you.
Yeah, I still remember the early days back at Lenz Avenue where you could go to Rock Church and anything could happen.
That's the truth. It's kind of still that way a little bit.
Yeah, anything can happen.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it was great. All right, let's get to the book. You've got a wonderful new book, What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do, Pro-Choices. Why is choice so significant for Christians?
Well, Gordon, all day long, every day, we all make choices. We make a choice to go to work, or we make a choice to go out and be a bum. It's choices all the time. But if we make God choices, if we seek God's purpose and will for our life, then we're blessed. He said in Deuteronomy, I set before you life and death. I think that's kind of what he said to Adam in the garden. Mm-hmm. I'm setting before you life and death. You are a free moral agent, so you choose. But I encourage you, choose life. It'll affect you and your seed.
Well, why do we think as Christians, and I know I've gotten into this mindset where I've already made that choice. I've already chosen him. Yeah. I've already done that. But then you get into, you know, well, I'm going to do a compromising choice today. And you go, why? Why is it a constant need to make the right choice?
It really is a constant need. The Bible said there is a way that seems right. That's our compromising. It seems right. It seems good, but it's deadly. And so the path of the righteous grows brighter and brighter. I looked at that at one time. It says it goes farther and farther, like a light in a lamp. When you serve God, it just opens up before you. But the choices you make today affect your tomorrow. But, you know, so much of a reason for us as parents is it affects our children. I think that Cain and Abel knew what Adam and Eve had done. I think they knew. And they probably said, look, sons, this is what happened. And then they got out there on their own, but they knew their father did it, and, you know, he made it. So they did it too. And it goes on down. We are free moral agents. We can make our choice. However, I believe God has a plan for you from the beginning. Jeremiah, before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you, and I ordained for you to be a prophet. But he didn't have to be a prophet if he was his choice.
Yeah, you can always choose to run away.
Exactly.
But God has ways of getting you back.
God has ways.
I'm living proof of that.
Absolutely. He knows how.
What happened to you? You had there's a story in the book about you with an 11-year-old nephew. And he made a typical 11-year-old complaint. Why do I have to go to church tonight?
My sister sent me her boy. He was 11 years old, and she was not living for God. And she sent me this boy. And he had been with us about 2 or 3 days, and it came a Tuesday night when we were going to church. And I was cooking supper, and he said to me, do I have to go to church tonight? And I turned around. It was on the tip of my tongue to say, listen, we're going to church. If you don't like it, I'll pack your bags and send you home. I mean, I was ready, you know. And before I could get the words out of my mouth, Gordon, I heard the Spirit of God say in my heart, don't you ever say that to him. He is at home. And whoa, little did I know, Gordon, little did I know I was raising a preacher. He's a pastor in Florida today. And he's raised a son that's in training to be a pastor. Just amazing. God choices. God told me that I had a choice to make. I could have spoke my mind, or I could have listened to God and not said a thing and raised a preacher. Or at that moment, it was life and death for him. I could have sent him home. Yeah. But the first service he went to, probably that Tuesday night, when John Jimenez preached, and this boy went up and gave his heart to the Lord, and we baptized him in water, and he came out of water with his 11 years old, with his hands up speaking in other tongues as the Spirit of God filled him. And he's lived a life for God, and he's a pastor down in Florida.
Yeah. And we have that power. It's like every word we speak, we don't understand the power of it.
Of life and death. Power of life and death is in our tongue. I could have killed that boy's future, or I could have undergirded him with love and nourished him. He went off when he was about 19. He went to live with his father down in South America. His dad worked for Reynolds Aluminum. And when he came back, he called me from Dallas. Now, I don't live in Dallas. I live in... He called me. And after a few days, I knew that's where he'd go and see his brother. We got a phone call. This little voice said, can I come home? And when he came home, when he came back, he said, you know, he said, I saw other people. He went to the bars. He went to drinking. He said, I saw him doing all that, and he said, I realized what they were looking for is what I already had. And he picked the phone up. I want to come home. He made a choice.
Made a choice.
He made the right choice.
And came home.
Yes.
Talk about Psalm 23. You say that's a blueprint for our choices.
Oh, yes. The Lord is my shepherd because I've chosen him. You know, and yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thy rod and thy staff, your word and your spirit comfort me. It's my choice. I've chosen God. I've chosen his will, his way. You know, you can choose your own way, but you're going to end up, it's deadly. But when you choose God's way, he's got you covered. No matter, you can go through a lion's den. And evidently, that was God's will for Daniel. Yeah, hallelujah. But he came out, nobody ate him. Nobody ate him. The fiery furnace was God's will for those 3 Hebrew boys. Now, it wasn't what you really have to be walking by, living close to the Lord. But they came out without the smell of smoke. That was God's way. The way of the flesh would have been give it up and deny God and go the other way. They stuck with God's way. If you stick with God's path, one of the greatest comforts to me is, Gordon, I always know He's got my back. I always know He's got my back.
One day I was reading Psalm 23 and God spoke to me, I can lead you beside still waters, but I can't make you drink. Choose to drink what God has for you. Ann's book is called Pro-Choices, What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do. It's available in stores nationwide. Here's a word for you. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself.